Refreshing. We are still holding our council meetings at the Owen Sound, or at the Grey County Council Chambers, and it looks like we'll be here for another, I would think, 4 to 6 weeks, perhaps as many as 8 weeks.
Oh.
And we are very anxious to get back into our home council chamber, but as we know, with construction, it's one day at a time, so we're getting close. Having said that, do we have any disclosure of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, any additional items? Councilor Heinbecker.
Thank you. Which will be bringing up an issue about the buses.
Any other members of council, additional items? Staff? Okay. Madam Clerk.
I'd just like to advise that report 12B10 from the fire chief presenting a disaster relief center has been deferred to our next meeting.
Oh, okay, thank you. We have 2 sets of in-camera minutes for receipt or approval. Council's wish. Councilor Burns.
Just a reminder about the faith blessing.
Yes, thank you. That's very, thank you. I'm actually a little bit ahead of myself. Welcome, Reverend Miller.
Thank you.
Good to see you here this evening.
Good to be here again. Thank you. Let us pray. Lord, our Creator, in Scripture you taught your ancient people to seek the welfare of the cities in which they lived. We commend our city of Owen Sound and all its neighborhoods to your care, that we might be kept free from social strife and decay. Give us strength of purpose and concern for others, that we may create here a community of justice and peace where your will may be done. Through your Son, Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councilor Burton. Actually thought you were praying, and I was wondering what's going on over there.
Disclosure of pecuniary interest, we've looked after that early on. Confirmation of the minutes, please, from the regular council meeting held on February the 11th.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Purdon, that the minutes of the regular meeting of City Council held on February 11th, 2013, as printed, be adopted.
Thank you. All those in favor? Thanks. Opposed? That motion is carried. Resolution moving council into committee of the whole, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Purdon, that City Council now move into committee of the whole to consider public meetings, deputations, public question period, matters arising from correspondence, reports, matters tabled, motions for which notice was previously given, and other business.
Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. As quickly as we're in committee of the whole, we are going to move right into a public meeting with regards to the 2013 budget, and I'll ask for a motion to adjourn the council meeting, please. Councillor Purdon?
So moved.
All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. We are now in a public meeting. The public meeting is open. I have a statutory piece I'm to read. Section 2901 of the Municipal Act 2001 requires a municipality to prepare and adopt a budget each year. This is a public meeting in furtherance of that requirement and is an opportunity for members of the public to offer comments on the budget as presented. Personal information collected at this public meeting is collected under the authority of the Municipal Act 2001. It will be used to complete the budget process and will form part of the public record. Questions about this collection should be addressed to City of Owen Sound Clerk, Kristen Van Olfen. We now are in officially our public meeting on the 2013 budget. I would ask if there are comments, please, from the Director of Financial Services.
Thank you, Your Worship. The city's proposed 2013 budget will see an increase of 5.19%. As we're all aware, there are 3 parts to a city tax notice: the county levy, the city levy, and the education levy. When you combine all 3, the increase will be 3.26%. Factors affecting the 2013 budget were wage and benefit settlements, new debenture payments, and reductions in our OMPF grant. Where are our funds spent? By division, police and fire account for 46% of our funding. Roads, waste management, and other items account for 19%. Administration is 10%. Community services and the services they provide account for 8%. How are the funds spent? Salaries and wages account for 52% of our budget. Materials, supplies, and services account for 23%. Transfers to reserves account for 13%. Debenture payments 8%. And utilities account for 4% of our budget. Council and staff held 3 sessions open to the public to set this budget in October, November, and December, and we look forward to hearing comments this evening.
Thank you very much. I know that the clerk is busy trying to find the report to place up on the screen. Indicated some charts, I believe. Do we have comments from the city clerk, please?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to advise council that notice of this public meeting respecting the budget was provided by advertisement in the Sun-Times newspaper on February 1st, 2013, as well as through social media, and no written comments have been received respecting the budget at this time.
Now I would open the floor to comments from any member of the public who is here this evening for this particular 2013 budget meeting. If there are any members of the public who would like to comment on the 2013 budget, as the Director of Financial Services mentioned, there were 3 meetings that happened last fall leading up to this day, setting priorities and coming up with the 2013 budget for the City of Owen Sound. No one is rushing to the podium, so I will declare the public meeting going once, going twice. The public meeting is now closed. Thank you. We do have a second public meeting. And there was going to be, yet again, a third public meeting this evening. However, that particular one you'll see on your agenda, which is a public meeting with regards to the application for rezoning 919 Fifth Avenue East. That meeting is no longer required as the application has been formally withdrawn. We will move to the public meeting on the fees, proposed amendments to fees and charges bylaw, specifically section B3, building fees. This is a public meeting under the Ontario Building Code. Consider a proposed increase in fees under the city's building bylaw pursuant to section 7(6) of the Building Code Act 1992 as amended, Division C, section 1.9.12 of the Ontario Building Code. Personal information collected at this public meeting is collected under the authority of the Municipal Act 2001. It will be used to complete the building fees amendment process and will form part of the public record. Again, questions about this collection should be addressed to the Owen Sound City Clerk, Kristen Van Olfen. Thank you. Declare the public meeting is now open, as well as we have comments leading from the Director of Community Services, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Building on the 3 budget meetings, at your December meeting, in consideration of a report on building permit fees, council had directed that staff give notice of a public meeting around a proposed 10% increase in building permit fees. Mr. Green, the city's CBO, is with me tonight. So the building code sets out that where you propose an increase in fees, that the municipality give notice and have a public meeting. So the purpose of tonight's meeting is really twofold: to describe the proposed increases and obtain input from the public on those changes. I would note that the Director of Financial Services pointed out to me earlier today that in the BMA study that's part of the finance minutes, you'll see that Owen Sound was compared on a number of different categories. One of those was building permit fees, and Owen Sound ranks very low among its peers, so our building permit fees are very low compared to other Ontario municipalities. As required by the Act, we gave notice of the public meeting. It was in the paper. We also did an individual mailing to a number of individuals and companies with whom we work. As well, notice was on the city's website. We had packages of information on the website and also available at City Hall. So what do the proposed fee increases mean for the single-family home on the left? At about 1,700 square feet, an increase of $128 for that home, or $1,460 for the overall fee. For the home on the right, less, it's 1,044 square feet home, an increase of $78 for a total fee of $899. For an accessory building or a structure like this deck, the fee would be $120, which is a $10 increase over the old bylaw. In terms of commercial and industrial buildings, you'll see on the right a snowy day at Heritage Grove. That building at $5.8 million. The proposed increase in fee from $935 per thousand of construction value to $1025 would be an additional $5,200 in revenue. On the left, you'll see the addition to the Dairy Queen that was just completed. That would have been an addition of $20 on a fee like that of $10,000 worth of construction value. You'll see here designated structures, which are the radio tower in back and the solar panels in front. There's just a small, it would just be a small increase again in those fees. The partial permits, an increase of $38 in those permits. There's quite a bit of administration to that. In terms of plumbing permits, change from $38.50 to $42 for a residential building. The minimum charge is $95 for commercial and industrial, from $77 to $85. And then you add into that stacks, rainwater leaders, and fixtures. For an average, let's say a home had 6 fixtures, that would be an addition from $51 to $57 for those fixtures, in addition to the fee under 2A. Site services, again, the same change from $935 to $1025 per $1,000 of construction value. No change for water conditioners, no change for where we're issuing a conditional building permit like we did for the family health team. Demolition permits on a small structure from $165 to $180. On something larger like what was done at the Kirk's Fire, from $550 to $600. Larger buildings like that of the PPG goes from $1,100 per structure to $2,400 a structure, and no change in the security required under those fees. Change in use permits, the refundable inspection deposit, which gets people back to us for their final inspections, transfers of permits and occupancy permits, no changes proposed in those. Tent permits from small tents, there is no charge. A tent over 60 square meters is $50, no charge. A larger tent, like what you would see at the Salmon Spectacular, is $200, and that really reflects that many of these tents are erected by nonprofit groups, so trying to not hit those groups. So that's a quick run through of the proposed fees, Your Worship. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them or direct them to Mr. Green.
Thank you very much for that presentation. I will ask if there are any comments from the City Clerk, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. As the Director of Community Services mentioned, notice of this public meeting respecting the building fees amendment was provided by advertisement in the Sun-Times paper on February 8th, 2013, as well as through social media and by email directly to local contractors. No written comments have been received at this time.
Okay, thank you. I'll now invite members of the public, if you would like to provide comment on this particular matter, that is the proposed amendments to the fees and charges bylaw. You are more than welcome to do so at this time. I don't see anyone jumping up to the podium here for this particular matter. I'll ask another time. Is there any member of the public who would like to make a comment on these, the proposed amendments to the fees and charges bylaw? Seeing none, I'll close the public meeting, and I'll ask for a motion to reconvene the council meeting, please. Councillor McManaman, all those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. We're now back in committee of the regular council, and I would ask that we invite our first deputation this evening, and I think I see, there he is. Welcome, Mr. James Skoniak, the Vice President of Corporate Affairs from Bruce Power, and we welcome you here this evening with an update on activities at Bruce Power.
Perfect. Well, thanks very much for having me this evening. Just to give a bit of context, as an initiative for 2013, and we hope to continue this on a regular basis, we're actually reaching out to all the municipal and city councils in Bruce Grey and Huron counties, at least on an annual basis, to give an update on our performance and some of the things that you can expect to see from Bruce Power. And actually, I'm here in this room tomorrow for Grey County Council. So for your county councilor, you'll hear this presentation twice. So what I've done is I've just put together sort of a high-level overview on how we ended 2012, and I have a couple of three short 30-second advertisements that I'm actually going to show you at the end and explain a little bit about our focus from a communications point of view in 2013. So just to kind of back up, I know many of you are familiar of Bruce Power, but it's always helpful to reintroduce who we are and where we are today. A lot of people across the province don't know this, but we're actually the largest operating nuclear facility now in the world, capable of producing about 6,300 megawatts. And with all 8 units going, we'll be well over 30% of Ontario's electricity mix. As we look back at our first 11 years of operation, we're actually the largest private investor in Ontario's electricity infrastructure. It's important to note that we're one of Canada's largest public-private partnerships. The Bruce site still remains owned by the people of Ontario, and all of our, we have a long-term lease of the facility, and so we're investing private capital into public assets. Of course, in addition to being a large generator in the province, last May, Hydro One completed a $600 or so million transmission upgrade from Bruce to Milton to enable additional generation from the Bruce Power site to the Greater Toronto Area, and also renewable generation coming online in the region. And of course, one of the really unique things about Bruce Power is, in addition to being all Canadian owned, is both of our unions are owners in the business, and actually a majority of our employees are also investors in the business. So just a bit of background on Bruce Power, and as I mentioned before, we're the largest operating nuclear facility in the world. And one of the things that comes with that, and I'm sure a lot similar to what a municipal level of government like Owen Sound has to be faced with, is, of course, we're required to have a lot of on-site sort of infrastructure. So this is a map of the Bruce Power site, and actually, because we're located in a rural area, actually we have an additional requirement for about 300 to 400 people on site in the sort of emergency response security specific area. So, we very much look at our site as a small municipality, over 100 buildings, everything from snow clearing to health centers. A lot of the type of services that are important to you to deliver as a city are also pretty important for our site. There's certainly a lot of debate on energy policy in the province these days. I actually think it's always been the case, but one of the things we also always like to reinforce with folks is, just remind people, where do we get our electricity from every year? So these are end of 2012 numbers. So on an annual basis, 57% of our electricity in the province comes from nuclear. Hardly a day would go by where we would ever drop under half of the electricity in the province. But you can also see in the supply mix, there's a lot of other important changes that have taken place in Ontario, and I'm going to talk about the reduction of coal electricity in a minute. Obviously a lot of discussion on the renewable side of the equation. Wind was at about 3%, solar and others at 1%. But, the real dominant message here is that, In Ontario, there's a number of important planks to our electricity system, and nuclear remains a pretty critical plank in a balanced mix. As we look at sort of where Bruce Power has come from, in 2013, we're expecting a record year of output on the site. For those of you that have followed the developments of the Bruce Power site over the course of the years, you've known that, you know, throughout the 1990s, the entire Bruce A facility was laid up and effectively shut down. And you can see in this graph that I've provided really over the last 11 or 12 years, the dramatic comeback story of the Bruce Power site. Went from 4 units of operation to 8 units today, our maximum capability. And in 2013 will really be our full entire calendar year where we can realize the full capacity of the site. And you can see that significant trend. You know, we often talk about the $7 billion of investment that has gone into the Bruce Power site, and that's actually the result of that investment. So we've seen, you know, not only better performance from the operating units, but being able to bring a lot of new electricity onto the system. If we look back at 2012, and the reason why you know, this is an important opportunity for us to certainly get our message out. It was a really historic year for the company. We returned units 1 and 2 to service. They had almost been out of service for about 20 years. It was in the early 1990s. Those units were taken out of service, so it was very good for us to be able to see that multi-year $4.8 billion investment project come back to service. But also on our operating units, units 3 to 8, we saw a number of very important milestones. In units 3 and 4, we had a $300 million life extension outage in Unit 3 last year. And of course on Unit 4, also a life extension outage to again continue to put investment into the outages. And really what we're seeing all of this investment is realizing is not only increased output, but increased reliability of the nuclear units. And one of the things I should say, because I'm talking about in many of these slides, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars of investments, is that sometimes when people hear us talk about billions of dollars, they assume that means the price of the power that comes from the units is also high, and that's not the case. One of the real advantages, if we look at from a nuclear point of view, is that we do produce such a high volume of electricity. So the output from the Bruce Power site will still be among the most affordable, low-cost in the province. So if you look at your electricity bill, you know, you'll have 3 tiers of pricing. The nuclear fleet really provides that low-cost tier of pricing, and frankly enables some of the higher cost generation that has to come online to do things in support of, such as we are doing with the phase out of coal. Also in 2012, in addition to a lot of investments, we also had our strongest report card by the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission in terms of our performance. And I know many from Grey County were also involved in the Huron Challenge Trillium Resolve exercise led by Emergency Measures Ontario that really tested our region's capability to respond to natural events. I talked really briefly about the supply mix in Ontario. One of the important messages we're trying to get out, and you'll see as just before I wrap up here, is the important role that Bruce not only plays in keeping the lights on in Ontario, but the role we've played in terms of helping phase out coal electricity. That was an agenda that came into play almost 10 years ago in the province. You know, coal was about 30% of our output, and as I mentioned in the slides, about 3%. By the end of 2013, it'll be phased out. And you can see by this graph the role that Bruce has played in that, and we're accounting for about 70% of the coal phase out in the province. And of course, one of the things that has gone along with a lot of our efforts is a demographic challenge. I think you probably see it in your community as well in a lot of businesses. But you can see as we've invested in the units, we've also had to invest in the workforce, and to not only tackle technical challenges, but also build a workforce that is there for the long term. So you see, you know, in 2001 when we came to site, the number of staff on site under 35 was 10%, now it's 32. So you're seeing us, in addition to the investment, building a workforce that can be there for the long term. In terms of the long-term market for nuclear in Ontario, we still see a pretty solid picture for 50% nuclear as part of a balanced supply mix, and we don't expect that to change. I just wanted to provide folks a graph that sort of shows the evolution of Bruce Power. I know I've touched on it previously, but it really shows we took over the site in January 2001, where the site was, where we are today. But you also see, as we get later on in the decade, the remaining 6 units on site needing to be refurbished. So that's about a $12 to $16 billion remaining investment. And that's actually what we're very active right now working with the Ontario Power Authority on, as to how do we tackle those 6 refurbishments, because of course we play such a significant role in meeting the province's supply mix, that it's important that we not only refurbish those units, but refurbish them in a way where we can keep the operational, the high levels of operational performance up to keep the lights on in the province. So I know I kind of rushed through a few slides. I know I'm limited to 10 minutes, so I may be already kind of pushing close to that mark. So I just wanted to show you the 3 television ads. We just launched them last week. They're running all across the province, from Toronto to Sudbury to Ottawa to London, and they're 3 30-second ads. They say if you can't tell a story in 30 seconds, you can't tell it at all, that we think tell our story. So in 30 seconds, they'll probably tell the story better than I told you in 12 minutes. So I'll play the first ad. Oh. Sorry. There we go. Of course, there's supposed to be some audio, so maybe I can speak with it, but let me just... Just try to turn the volume up on here. Oh, it's on mute. There we go. If you don't mind, just bear with me 1 second here. Just turn that up. Am I doing it right here? Current side, does that sound right?
Every day in Ontario, nuclear energy powers half of our homes, businesses, schools, and hospitals. By renewing our nuclear fleet, we can keep electricity costs low for our families, the lights on, and the air we breathe clean. Affordable electricity.
Part of a balanced mix, that nuclear is, one tool in the drawer, that it's critical to phasing out coal and staying off coal, and of course, providing the reliability of the system. So that's kind of a quick few-minute update. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and of course, I've also, I think we've also offered, and we have a date set for any members of council or staff who are interested in touring the site and seeing the facility firsthand, for those of you that haven't ever been to the site, or maybe not in some time. It'll be interesting to see it with 8 units at full operation.
Well, thank you very much for the presentation, and I know that there is quite a number of members of council and senior management that they've already confirmed their attendance for the tour, and I know that that'll be an opportunity to really in-depth get into some more questions and answers. But is there any member of council who would like to ask a question? Councillor Wright.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. If I could, I'm just wondering, does the low water level have any effect on the plant?
Well, certainly, actually, that's something we've been looking at. Certainly, we have seen fluctuations in the Great Lakes. You know, it's when we have, the Bruce site is actually, if you look at all the nuclear sites in the province, we've actually gone through 2 pretty comprehensive environmental assessments on the site, both for Bruce A and B. And when we've carried out those environmental assessments, we do a number of evaluations as to things like water temperature, lake levels, and all those sort of things. So, in terms of the band in which you could reasonably predict upper or lower, we're still within that. So there's no kind of significant adverse impact, but it is certainly something from an environment and sustainability perspective that we're conscious of and thinking about. There's an organization that actually approached us at the end of 2012. We look forward to doing some more work with. It's called Georgian Bay Forever. And that's actually one of the things that this particular group is looking at. So it's something we're obviously monitoring, but within our environmental assessment envelope, it's nothing that's outside of that bound which you could predict. I mean, there's some people that say that it's an irreversible trend. There's other people that say it's part of a cyclical, and only time will tell. But in terms of our operating conditions, it's still within that bound.
Councillor Purdon.
Thanks very much for the presentation, and I just wanted to thank Bruce Power for being such a fine corporate citizen. You didn't speak to the one slide where it said the $1.2 million investment in the community, and certainly many groups that I've worked with have been very thankful for those types of investments, and we could only wish that there were more corporations that were so generous in helping out in the community, so thank you for that.
Great, well, thanks, and I shouldn't have skipped over the point, it is an important piece. Also, in addition to the $1.3 million, a lot of our employees are also very generous. We do a lot of work, whether it's with the United Way of Bruce and Gray, with Easter Seals, with the hospital foundations. It's an important part of what we do, and recognize that we're a large operating company in a small community, and that's part of what we call the social license to operate as well, so I appreciate that.
Any other questions from any members of council? Councillor Lemon.
Yes, I have one. Years ago, Ontario Hydro used to enter into private contracts for the sale of power. Does Bruce Nuclear do that?
We have a group called Bruce Power Direct that looks at a lot of that. There's not a large degree of that in the province of Ontario, because actually a lot of the generation in the province is actually directly contracted through the Ontario Power Authority. So you have a pretty small volume of electricity that does that. We do have an organization called Bruce Power Direct on the Bruce B side of the plant that looks at a little bit of that, but it's a relatively small volume. It wouldn't be to the sort of levels that you may have historically seen with an Ontario Hydro, because the whole purpose of the Ontario Power Authority was to set up an entity that could procure electricity that would enable new generation to come on the market. So of course they're directly procuring that electricity in kind of a bilateral way, if I could put it that. So that really takes a lot of that generation out of play, so to speak.
No, I just was wondering, if you're getting up to full supply, whether you would do that for an industry or something like that.
We do tend to find that as we're at our full capacity. I mean, one of the challenges Ontario has, and this is kind of an underreported story in the province, there's not many jurisdictions in Canada, the US, or anywhere in the world that have a dual peaking market like we have in Ontario. We have really high summer peaks in particular and winter peaks, but we also have really low trough periods. And even during the course of the day, you have periods of fairly high demand, and it can drop off pretty quickly at night. And when you're building an electricity system, you have to make a decision. Are you going to build for the troughs or the peaks? And in Ontario, we've built for the peaks. And what that means is there are certain times of the day, certain periods of the year where you have surplus of electricity. So one of the things we've made investments into our units to do is to actually be able to reduce their output as needed. So on our 6,300 megawatt site, 2,400 of our megawatts can actually be scaled down. And a little bit of that is also the recognition of the fact coal's not in the market anymore. And coal always used to be able to provide that flexible generation. So it's a much different market now, and that's how we're trying to manage through it.
Thank you.
Again, thank you so much for your presentation, and I know at least Councillor Wright and I will get to hear your presentation again tomorrow. It gives us a whole evening to come up with...
Try to switch it up.
Questions.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thanks very much. And we're now at the point in our agenda where we're at public question period, and this is an opportunity, if there are any members of the public this evening who would like to ask a question of this council, this would be your opportunity to come to the podium, please, and if you could just state your name and address for the clerks, that would be helpful. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor Haswell and members of council. My name is Sherry Hatcher, and I am a taxpayer of Georgian Bluffs and Meaford, and I'm also a registered nurse. I have an vested interest in the positive benefits of sports and recreation and the health of our children. I have been following with interest the negotiations for a recreational agreement. I've been asked by Mayor Barfoot for written clarification that the $72,000 figure is negotiable. On February the 23rd, via email, Councillor McManaman clarified that based on 2012 participating figure numbers, the figures would be approximately $68,000. I then passed this information on to Mayor Barfoot. He responded back via email that he would like written correspondence from Owen Sound City Council that the figure is indeed negotiable. Now, in the Friday Sun-Times, Mayor Haswell, you were quoted as saying that the door is always open to negotiations, particularly with any kind of phase-in. So I have 3 questions for council. Can Owen Sound Council confirm that the contribution would be based on real numbers of participants?
Short answer is yes.
Okay. Is council in fact open to considering a phase-in?
Yes.
Okay. So would council then be willing to provide written confirmation to Mayor Barfoot and Georgian Bluff Council of these facts?
In fact, that was done, and the letter went on Friday afternoon. In fact, our city manager had a meeting with the CAO of Georgian Bluffs. It was hand-delivered, as well as it was sent via email as well. So they have received
Awesome.
that.
Okay, and have you heard anything back
No.
from them yet? No. Okay,
And it was late Friday afternoon, so
okay, okay.
yeah, they're well informed.
Okay, awesome. Well, I did promise Mayor Barfoot that I would bring it up with council, so I will report back to him that I indeed...
I have to congratulate you on all the work that you're doing, and I would imagine that Georgian Bluffs is certainly being well served by your advocacy on their behalf. Councillor Body.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was just going to clarify, at a meeting in the summer, staff met with their staff, and it was discussed that we would take the participant fee, which at that time we're looking at, and still are looking at $125 per child, and it would be based on the participation from the year before. We still stand behind that. That is open. That was discussed. It may have been lost in translation. Certainly in our summer we were discussing 2011 numbers, which were in the neighborhood of 580 something. The 2012 numbers for Georgian Bluffs participants was 540 something, which would reduce the fees that they'd be paying from $72,000 down to $68,000. That's definitely what we intended and continue to intend. And our very last meeting with Georgian Bluffs, we suggested that we would be open to phasing in over 5 years, which is a reduction for them. So instead of paying $125 per participant in that 3rd year, it would be in the 5th year. Phasing it in would be somewhere in the neighborhood of $110 to $115 per child in that 3rd year as it ramps up. We are absolutely open to that. That's always been our position, and it's got to be clear that that is our position.
Yes, and I do understand that actually, but for some reason, they want written confirmation versus
got it.
Discussion.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you.
We don't like to leave any gray areas in those kinds of negotiations, because it does get fairly convoluted at times when there's a lot of different people at the table. So I can say that they have that now.
Perfect.
Quite clearly.
Okay, thank you.
Clarification?
I'm just wondering if we can send a specific letter that says specifically that.
It has been done, and you should have received a copy, actually.
Okay, but I didn't think it set out specifics about a 5-year, that we're willing to phase in over 5 years, and that it would be based on the number of participants. I'll have to look at that letter again, but I didn't.
The 5-year phase-in is something that council would require more discussion on. There was often discussion around 3-year phase-in. The discussion around 5-year phase-in was never the ultimate decision of council. And that's something that certainly could be discussed.
Well, I move that the City of Owen Sound send a letter to Georgian Bluffs that we will consider phasing it in over 5 years, the recreation user fee, or the recreation agreement amount, so that it's on the table. We're making it very clear that that's our position, and that's my motion.
And that the contribution is based on real numbers as well? That the contribution that they make will be based on real numbers. So, yes, they seem to be stuck on those 2 points.
Both of those points.
Thank you.
My motion.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much for your presentation as well, and council will now discuss thank you. Councillor McManaman.
Thank you, Your Worship. Before Mrs. Hatcher leaves, I just also want to thank her for her efforts on this matter. The 2 municipalities have had difficulty, obviously, coming to agreement, and Ms. Hatcher's advocacy and sort of honest brokering here is very much appreciated by us, and I think more importantly, appreciated by the different minor sports groups and the youth of the community. So she's to be commended for her efforts. I am encouraged by these discussions, these emails that Mayor Barfoot has sent, asking for this confirmation in writing. And certainly by saying that, it appears that perhaps there is an opportunity there, and I certainly hope there is. I know the Mayor Haswell has sent a letter. If this motion from council is further confirmation, I think it shows we're trying to do everything we can to have an agreement that would benefit the youth of our area. So I certainly will support the motion, and hope that we can get something settled in the immediate future. Thank you.
Yes, Your Worship, I am proposing a friendly amendment if it's needed. I think it is. And that is that the participant number is based on the previous year's actual.
Correct, that's what's intended.
Would you add that to make sure it's in the letter so that everything's clear, abundantly clear?
Yeah, I'm not opposed to that being in the letter, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I'd also like to thank Ms. Hatcher for her presentation and for her advocacy for children in our communities. I was part of the recreation negotiation team as well, and certainly support this motion. I think we've been very clear from the city's perspective that having an agreement with both Meaford and Georgian Bluffs was always the intent of the negotiations, but having an agreement that's based on the actual cost to the city of providing recreational services and the operation of those services was also very important, and it was a change in the way the agreement was based in the past. I'm very hopeful that we can get past that in whatever way we can with a phased-in fee structure, if that's going to help our partners and help the children and youth in our community. So I support the motion.
Councillor Dale.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to be clear, what Councillor Body has moved tonight, with the possible exception of a 5-year phase-in, is the city's position since last summer. We're not breaking any new ground here. I'm sorry that Georgian Bluffs sat through those negotiations and didn't understand that, but not having been on those, I did read the minutes of those meetings, and that's clearly the intention of council. I'm a little concerned about a 5-year phase-in, but if that's the will of council, I'm afraid that any gains we might make will be eroded by inflation over a 5-year stretch, and that 3 years certainly seems to be a much more reasonable approach. And in fact, at one point, I was thinking that the 125 was the amount, and it's whether they were signing a 3-year or a 5-year agreement, not specifically with the phase-in. I'm certainly very comfortable with the 3-year phase-in. 5, I'm a little uncomfortable with just the expanse. We're presently subsidizing at even the 125, the citizens of Georgian Bluffs and Meaford, to provide their children with access to low-cost recreation activities. I'm not sure that subsidizing and continuing to do that for another 5 years is in the best interest of the Owen Sound taxpayer, but if that's what it takes to get a deal, I would like to hear from the members of the committee what they feel. But we're not breaking really new ground here. This should have been quite clear to everyone that was in the negotiations.
Obviously it was.
Councillor Body.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to respond, we started off originally talking about a 5-year agreement, but Meaford wanted a 3-year agreement because they planned, or their new CAO had announced that she wants to build their own arena within 3 years with swimming pool and things. So that's why we ended up with a 3-year agreement instead of a 5-year agreement. It was always our intention to have a 5-year agreement. We've had 5-year agreements in the past in succession. I don't know how many years of succession. It's got to be close to 20 for some of the 5 years at a time. I believe our library, I should be looking at you, you'll know. The library's 10, has been 5 in the past. So we started off anyway, looking at a 5-year agreement was always what our intention was. We expend a certain amount of energy and staff time going through these. I think we met 6 times, and if we're doing that every 2 to 3 years, it starts to become an expense in itself, and that's why a 5-year plan, I think, is appropriate.
Any other members of council would like to speak to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. Just for the record, we have never had official correspondence from the municipality of Georgian Bluffs that they had completed their negotiations. There has never been any official correspondence from Georgian Bluffs indicating any reflection of any of the negotiations that the committee undertook over the last year and a half. So I would say, in my books, we've done everything that we can possibly do and protect the taxpayers of Owen Sound while doing so. And this is a little further than I would have liked to have gone, but I can tell you that if it can provide opportunities for kids to be involved in sports, it's the right thing to do. Councillor McManaman.
Just one minor matter. Could that motion be expedited? I believe they have a meeting this week, so if it could go as soon as possible. I'm looking to the clerk there, but I don't know what the normal timelines are, but if it could. Thank you.
Okay, moving along, we have any further members of the public here with a question for council? Seeing none, we have a letter from Chris Heinbecker, President, Owen Sound Bingo, with regards to a request for support of an initiative to increase the number of bingo sessions. What is council's direction?
Support this.
Councilor McManaman?
Thank you, Your Worship. Question for the clerk. I understand they have to ask for these. Well, maybe that is my question. Do they have to ask for this permission? Are they, we don't have any grounds to, I'm sort of forming my question as I'm talking here. Do we have any grounds to not allow them to do it?
That's a good question. Madam Clerk.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship, we did contact the ministry to determine when this request came in, whether the municipality had a role to play, and the ministry did advise us as the licensing body for this type of activity in our municipality, that we did have an opportunity to speak to whether or not additional gambling events should take place. They did not identify what factors we should consider when we were making that decision, but they did indicate that the municipality did have an opportunity and should have an opportunity to speak to whether additional gambling activities happen.
Thank you. I know a number of these events that they're proposing for the different charitable groups have happened in the past and have sort of fallen off as bingos have become less lucrative. And it appears perhaps the Saturday afternoon session was a regular one, the Friday night evening one was a regular one. I can't speak to the other ones, but so the DIA has a letter also in correspondence with some concerns around parking. When that bingo hall was put in place, they, and I don't know who I would ask this question of, they met with the bingo hall. They came up with some strategies to try and encourage their patrons to park not on the main street but in some of the lots. And I don't know who, anyway, I support the bingo, the extra sessions here that for the group and for the charities. I do wonder if there's an opportunity for them, the DIA, the city, to sit down and try and figure out a way to, a strategy around some of those parking concerns. So I don't even know who I'm asking that question of, so I'll just put it out there and see where we go. And I'd be happy to move a motion after this discussion.
Councillor Lemon, or Councillor Lemon?
Yes, Your Worship. I was on the DIA at that time, and there was encouragement for people to park on the side lots. I think Mary, you may remember this. We had signs in the bingo hall, and we actually had a draw, and the person whose license number was drawn was in the bingo hall, they received a prize. That was only if you parked in the lots, because of the concern that it was taking up retail shopping space. I think this could be done again. I think it's a matter of everybody working together. We do have a 2-hour limit, which my understanding from talking to Inspector McKinnon is enforced. And the bingo runs longer than 2 hours because people don't arrive at the start of the bingo. They arrive before that, and they often stay around afterwards. So a few tickets would be a really eloquent way of dissuading people from parking there longer than 2 hours. But I think we need to put a positive on it and see if there's a way to induce people to go to the long-term lots that are available to them, and there's lots of long-term parking. It's just a matter that some people don't want to walk any more than 2 feet.
Councillor Wright?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think Councillor Lemon basically said there's no point in me saying it again.
Okay. City Manager?
Thank you, Your Worship. We're happy to have some of those discussions, and we can certainly speak to the getting enforcement done in that area. So if it's appropriate, we can move forward with those discussions with the bingo hall. But I would keep in mind, and I've pointed this out previously, this is a permitted use. So we want to work with them rather than against them and move forward. So a successful bingo hall is one that fills the bingo hall, but not the main street.
Councillor Chambers?
Yes, and I'll just comment that Councillor Purdon and myself were at that meeting, and we were very supportive of the groups that were, the charity groups that were being mentioned in this letter, and there was never any question about not supporting the groups doing this. It was really the strategy of how, about the parking, and Councillor Lemon did say it right. We came up with a couple of those strategies, but you added another one about the prize for being in the long-term lots. So that's what's going forward for sure.
Mr. Furness has asked to make a few comments.
Sorry, late this afternoon, I had a call from Chris. Chris would have been here, but he had an accident, so he couldn't make it. His intention, I don't want to speak for him, but his intention is it's a different type of game. It's sort of bingo on demand, so it's not similar to what's been going now. And his intention and his target market is for existing people downtown. But it's worth having further discussion with, as discussed. He thought he might be able to have somebody here, but obviously not.
A lot of changes happening in terms of the bingo business and OLG regulations and so on. Was there another hand up on this side? Councillor McManaman.
Thank you, Worship. Then I would move receipt of this correspondence and the DIA letter that follows. And also, I would move that we approve the extra bingo dates as indicated, and ask the city manager or city staff to arrange a meeting with the hall operator to discuss the parking concerns.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. We have a letter from the chair of the Owen Sound DIA. What is council's direction on that?
Motion to receive.
Thank you, Councillor Lemon. Motion to receive. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. We have a memorandum from the administrator of the Owen Sound DIA with reduction. It's a request for reduction in the membership of the DIA Board of Management. It's council's direction on that particular piece of correspondence. Councillor Purdon?
I would like to move that the city agree to reducing the number of directors for the DIA. We did discuss this at the DIA meeting and believe it would be much easier to recruit people and to do the work of the DIA with the reduction in the membership.
Your Worship, in anticipation that that might be the case, I've crafted a resolution for consideration that speaks to the changing composition and shows what the new composition would be. It would keep both members of council to serve for one-year terms and take the 9 members of the general public and make them 8 instead.
Thank you. Councillor Adair.
So in effect, then, the number of downtown business owners and downtown property owners on the DIA would be reduced, but council's membership would in fact, as a percentage, increase quite a bit. I think I have a bit of a problem with the DIA, which is supposed to be an independent board of property owners and business people, being having such a high percentage of city council representation on that. If we're shrinking the numbers, we should be thinking about shrinking our numbers on that independent board as well. Or there will just be councillors and no business people on the committee.
Councillor Purdon.
With all due respect, Councillor Adair, I don't think we're shrinking the number of business owners on the DIA board to the level you're suggesting. I think the downtown and the viability of downtown is of critical interest to this council and our community. The board is working very well together with council, and I think this is a good recommendation and a good mix to have both the interests of the city and the interests of the downtown business well represented, but that the city is not in any position of majority to influence decisions with this membership.
Councillor Lemon.
Well, Your Worship, if we were out of the blue to say we're going to cut the number of members on the DIA, well, I would agree with Councillor Adair. But this request came from the DIA, which represents said business community, and asked to reduce it. So we're not eliminating. All we're doing is allowing the DIA to do what the DIA would want to do. And since they are an independent body, I think it's reasonable that we should follow it. And I certainly will vote for that.
Any further discussion? Now, we did have a mover. It was Councillor Purdon. And we have the motion in front of us on our screens. Any further discussion to the motion? All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. We are at item 12. We have quite a lengthy consent agenda, and that will be on the screen overhead, predominantly planning comments requiring little comment. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will move the consent agenda, including all of Georgian Bluffs and Meaford's business and the business licenses in the city, Golden Shears and Tennis North.
And we better not forget Belfour Property Restoration or Northern Republic Magazine.
Yes, and Balfour, that's right, Property and Restoration. And Neil McNeil, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Question about business license on that Northern Republic magazine. In the one section, it says, in the report, it says it's selling firearm magazines. In the part on your left, so speaking of firearms, on the part on your left, it says it's selling firearms. So could I ask for clarification?
What's selling?
Yes, Madam Clerk.
Through your worship, it is firearms magazines, and the license will be conditional on the operator receiving all of the provincial and federal licenses that they will require for that business, as well as our license from the municipality.
Thank you.
City Manager.
Just for clarity, it is not paper magazines, it is magazines for guns. So it is not journals, it is equipment for the guns.
Yes.
So for clarification, but they're not selling firearms, they're selling ammunition.
Holders for ammunition, yes. Magazines, yes.
The holders of ammunition, but not the actual ammunition.
Yes, a magazine, not a paper magazine,
Right.
a clip, whatever you
Things
want
that
to
go
call it.
bang.
No,
That's what I'm clear, that's what he's
They
saying.
don't go bang, but the things that
Come out of the
My
magazine.
understanding, it is not the ammunition, is the holder, and I've held a gun in my life once, so
This would
I'm
take
not an
on,
expert here,
conversation at Craig County Council.
yes.
No, my only concern is here, if I lived next door to Mr. McLean, I would want to know the difference here clearly, if he's selling ammunition or just magazine, but, so the clerk has answered, he's not selling ammunition. Is that correct? That's correct?
Community Services.
Okay, thank you.
Through you, Your Worship, I was similarly confused when I first looked at the business license and thought it was the magazines of a journal variety. I would note for council, an office for a salesperson is a permitted use. So there will be no, while there may be some storage of the item at the home for internet sales, there can be no retail sales from the home. So that is also reflected, as well as we've been in discussions with the city's chief of police regarding other approvals that are required for this type of license in the city. So those are being, or that condition is reflected in the home occupation business license condition.
Thank you. And I can assure council, as you know, we send a letter of congratulations to each new business that opens within the city, and I had the very same concerns when that business license application crossed my desk, and we drafted the letter pending the decision tonight, and the clerk and city staff looked into it at great length to ensure that it was quite a safe, responsible business.
Thank you.
All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. We have a report from our Supervisor, Human Resources, with regards to a change of carrier for employment benefits, and that is a potential savings to the municipality, which is always something that we are quite interested in knowing more about. So, good work on this. What is council's direction? Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a question, and my question is that and I'm not sure who to direct this to, our human resources person is here. My question is, when the change is made, and I certainly agree with it, and I compliment the work being done, because it is quite a savings, and it'll be good. Is there a period in there where an overlapping period where you're continually covered until the new one takes over?
Benefits or expenses that are incurred prior to May 1st will be covered by green shields, and that when we talked about the fact that we don't have a hold harmless agreement, we will be responsible for stuff that's incurred prior to May 1st, prior to moving over to Sun Life, and there will be a cost associated with those claims that are left over, and that's estimated to be between $50,000 and $60,000. So to answer your question, from the employee perspective, there'll be no interruption in coverage.
Thank you. I'll make the motion that we do make this change.
Okay. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you very much. We have a report again, don't go too far, Supervisor of Human Resources with regards to compensation for non-union employees. What is council's direction? Councilor McManaman?
Your Worship, question, the report's indicating you're recommending 1% increase. What's your experience or comparators out there in the municipal world? Is there anything you can tell us about that?
The Ontario Municipal Human Resources Association sent out a non-union compensation survey just this afternoon, which indicated the average municipal increase was 1.74%. The maximum increase reported was 2.75%, with the minimum being 0%. I have canvassed a number of communities in our area. Bruce County has come in with a 2.5%. Grey County does have a number on their agenda tomorrow. And Chatsworth is 1.2%. Grey Highlands is 1.3%, Hanover 1.8%, Meaford 2%, Southgate 1.2%, and West Grey 1.5%. So we are certainly at the lower end of our communities in our general community area.
Thank you for that. I'll move the recommendation, Your Worship.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. Now we have a report from our Director of Financial Services with regards to the 2013 budget. This seems like deja vu all over again.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you.
Yes, from our earlier public meeting, budgetary increases, 5.19, combined with the other portions of the municipal tax bill, the overall total levy increase is 3.26. We held 3 meetings between senior management and staff on over the budget. We have brought it from the original budget of 5.53 increase to what you see before you this evening. Certainly be open to any discussions.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor McManaman.
Thank you, Your Worship. Question for Mr. Ritchie. A number of, the way we do our tax increase is somewhat different than a number of municipalities, certainly even in our own region. When we say it's on our city budget, 5.19 with all the factors in, it's 3.26? 3.26. We have taken into account people's assessments, increases in people's assessment. We've changed the tax rate to compensate for that. Can you just discuss it, because it's one of those factors I don't think people truly understand when they see another municipality coming in at 0%, but that municipality hasn't taken the changes in assessment into account at all. So if there's been a 10% increase in assessment, they get 10% more money. If it's been 20%, it's 20%. Whereas our rate takes that into account and adjusts the rate accordingly. So when we say 3.26 and you compare your tax bill from last year, it should be 3.26% more. And I'm sorry if I'm trying to explain it, I should have let you do it. So please go ahead.
Through your worship, we try to actually eliminate the assessment change from discussing this evening. We're talking strictly about the budgetary change of the budget, as well as the budgetary change from the county and the education levy. How other municipalities portray their circumstances is certainly at their discretion, but you are correct. Most budgets, as people understand it, are increasing due to the same factors that ours are increasing: wage negotiations, debenture payments, and most local municipalities are also affected through the UNPF funding. So budgets are generally going up, and we reflect that ours is going up. We do factor in that with the county not going up nearly as much and the education levy being changed, we try to reflect what a taxpayer will see. If he's an average taxpayer, he will see an increase overall of 3.26%. We'll be coming forward the next several months with tax policy, and we will continue to urge council to make moves there, but those will be decisions made down the line. But certainly, all of the figures that I have seen from other municipalities, there is an increase in their budgets in 2013.
I suppose the best way to look at that would be, what were they spending last year and what are they spending this year? It's a simple exercise.
That is precisely the figures we presented this evening.
So if somebody's assessment in Owen Sound went up the average amount, they would see a 3.26% increase in their...
A property, we will be coming forward with tax policy next, and there will be some movement on that between the residential ratepayer and the commercial ratepayer. We are certainly restricted by provincial regulations, only passing on to the residential side, or sorry, to the commercial side, 1/2 of the percentage we pass on to the residential side. So commercial taxpayers will see very little, if any, increase in the tax paid in 2013 over what they paid in 2012. Residential taxpayers will see an increase, depending on the policy that council adopts. It will be more than 3.26, but that's next month's discussion. Currently, across the board, tax levy, total known salaries are going up 3.26%. Our next discussion will be exactly how we spread that amongst the taxpayers.
It's just, and thank you for that, it's just frustrating, I know, probably for other councillors too, when you see it portrayed that other municipalities are coming in at zero or considerably lower than us. Then you look at the amount of money they've collected, and that's considerably, the increase is more than us. And it's, anyway, it's just frustrating, and I know it's hard for our people, it's hard for us to understand, so it's hard for the public to get their heads wrapped around it too.
The way we portray this particular budgetary increase is the same as we portrayed it for 11 years, and it would be the same way we would portray it if by chance assessments went down. It would be interesting to see how others portrayed theirs if that ever occurred, but this is the way we portrayed it for 11 years and probably will for the next 7.
Thank you.
Councilor Garrett.
Thank you. We're just picking up on what Councilor McMenamin said. I'm certainly in the last decade or more, we have tried to be very clear with what our budgetary increase is and what that is a tax increase. We've taken it on the chin sometimes because other municipalities portray it differently. I think back to Mississauga went for at least a decade by proclaiming that they had no tax increase. Their budget almost doubled over that 10 years, and the actual tax amount that people paid was twice as much as it had been at the beginning of that 10 years, but they were able to say, well, we've had no tax increase, but people's taxes, the amount of money they actually physically paid to the municipality every year went up and up and up and up, but they were certainly able to portray it for about 10 years, and then I think people sort of cottoned on, well, if we've had 0% tax increase in 10 years and I'm paying twice in taxes what I was 10 years ago, that doesn't make any sense. So I think in the long term, trying to portray the numbers as accurately as possible is the best thing. And I know we've talked about, well, we can play that shell game as well, but we have decided not to do that and make it quite clear this is what the budget is and this is what the taxes are going to be.
Councillor Purdon.
I'd like to move that we approve the 2013 city budget as it's been presented.
Thank you. Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. We now have a report again from the Director of Financial Services with regards to the 2013 transit budget. And I might invite the Director to just briefly go over the recommendation, perhaps.
Thank you, Your Worship. Working with my colleagues, we have managed to find council some options to continue operating our transit service more or less as is for 2013, anticipating that we will be into negotiation perhaps for an RFP later in the year, but this will allow us an opportunity to review the transit study that we have undertaken. And the funding sources in order to do that are to allocate all of the gas tax that we received in 2013 to the transit budget, as opposed to putting some in the reserve for future capital. Using the roughly $59,000 that we had set aside in waste management, you will recall in our budget deliberations, we were not going to set aside a reserve in waste management to purchase another garbage truck. We left that in the budget because we might purchase it in future years. So in effect, that is available for one-year use. We've allocated that here as well. And we will be reporting shortly to council on our surplus from 2012, but at this time, we feel confident that there's roughly $248,000 to assist. This is one-time funding that will allow you to maintain this service in 2013, review the transit study, and then move on to 2014 with whatever recommendations came out of that, as well as issue an RFP. All my colleagues are here to help answer the question.
Thank you. Councillor Lemon.
Yes, Your Worship. It may sound imprudent to people that we're not putting money in the transit reserves, but I believe we have over $1 million in there now.
That's correct.
How much exactly do you know? 1.1 million. And depending on the options we pursue, that should be reasonably adequate for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Chamberlain.
Yes, I'd just like to compliment the, everybody for pulling this together, and I guess directly to you, Director, Mr. Ritchie, and I would like to move that we accept this recommendation.
Councillor Adair.
Thank you, Your Worship. I certainly support the recommendation. This buys us time, but it only buys us so much time. We need to, and I know that the committee is going to be working hard, but as a council, and I have something later for other business, but we need to have a plan for next year. And I'd like to thank the staff for buying us the time to figure that out.
Councillor Body.
Thank you, Your Worship. I notice in here that this extends the contract to September 30th, 2013, but the $400,000 covers a whole year, or just for that 6-month extension?
Yeah, the $400,000 additional cost is to cover the budget for the 2013.
For the whole year?
Yep. So it includes the extension as well as what we figure might be projected for the remainder of 3 months of the year.
So I just point out that's $400,000 that's going into keeping our buses going for the next year, that could be going to fiber optics, could be going to infrastructure, could be going to a 48-year-old City Hall 45, whatever it is, with windows that are 45 years old and a heating system that's 45 years old that's coming at us pretty soon. That's $400,000 that could be going into roads, it could be going into potholes, it could be going into a whole bunch of things, and hold your nose and vote, I guess. That's a lot of money that would be nice to be going someplace, and we continue to lose more money in busing. It's a concern to me. It's a concern to a lot of taxpayers, but we got to get there, I guess, and we need time.
Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. Your Worship. Now, the study that's being done, I'm assuming we're going to have public meetings.
Absolutely. In fact, I would expect and I would hope that Director of Operations would be bringing a report in the next couple of weeks even back to Council with a bit of an outline in terms of some public consultation. It's certainly been my understanding that it's the people using the buses that need to be in on that dialogue. And everybody understands budgets, and everybody understands when you have to provide a service within certain budgets. So I would defer to the Director of Operations, but I certainly would expect that there would be public consultation.
Well, I certainly hope so, because I mean, I think we need input into it. I believe that our service is not doing well because we don't provide a service. We provide a little bit of busing during a few hours of the day, but not where it's needed and not when it's needed. And so therefore, it's not being used. And if we're not going to use it, then we're going to lose it, and that's what we're doing, is we're losing it because we're not using it. And the other suggestion that came up was, I know that there's been a lot of talk about busing out to the mall on the west side of the city, where the theaters and that are, where busing is desperately needed, but it's not within the city limits. I wondered if anybody had suggested to our neighbor that gas tax, if they applied for gas tax, that they could use that to provide busing for their residents out there, or for their businesses out there, I should say, which would help them along. But there's a lot of suggestions about increasing the service of the bus that needs to come out, so I'm hoping that that will come out when the Director of Operations holds his public meetings.
I will go right to Mr. McRoberts for some comment on that.
Yeah. I believe the direction I have from the Operations Advisory Committee is to present to that committee the options basically, and give them a good thorough analysis and present the options to them to allow them to identify those options which they believe they want to bring forward to a public consultation process. And then we'll have that public consultation process. Based upon that process, council will then make a determination based upon that, what they would like to do moving forward. And at that point in time, that allows us to basically the time to prepare a request for proposals from any various transit operators, if that's what council decides, such that we can have a proposal complete and awarded by basically the September 1st and allow for a transition period by September 30th.
I'm going to go back to, thank you for that, Councillor.
Well, I'm going to ask a question then. You talk about bringing forth some options to the Operation Committee and then going to public.
It's just ridiculous.
Why would you not wait for the public meeting to get your options?
Certainly, the process of the transit study was to circulate and obtain public input. There were several focus groups that were undertaken as part of that study to gather input, and many of the suggestions that you've just mentioned, as well as many others, have been brought forward and are part of that study.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor McManaman.
Thank you, Your Worship. I wasn't going to comment here, but I have to. Councillor Boddy said, hold your nose and vote for it. I completely agree. A $400,000 increase in our transit operating budget. A $400,000 increase in our transit operating budget, taking us to a $1.2 million deficit. Not to put too fine a point on it, but to think that we can continue this service without significant increases in the fares and significant changes to the system, and by that I mean changes to the routes, I don't know how you possibly could move forward without both of those options, not one or the other, but both. It can't continue. It just can't. So if we want transit in Owen Sound to continue, and I think we all do, it's going to have significant changes to how it's done now. Half-hour service, 4 routes, all of that is clearly on the table. The fares showed that we're 26% below the Ontario average. I mean, those are just not, I'm not advocating for anything here. I'm saying we have to look at the reality here. And going into next year, as Mr. Ritchie's report says, all of that is on the table. So it's great. We are going to have public input. I hope to hear from the public ways they think we can save money, ways we can reduce and still operate a service that works for them. Because to think we can continue anywhere close to how we're doing it now is, anyway, I will vote for this motion because I guess we simply don't have any, as Councillor Adair said, it buys us time. But Those are my comments. Thank you, Your Worship.
Well, I wasn't going to say anything, but there have been some comments, and it's forcing me to. One of the things reasons for the increase by Miller in what they were suggesting the contract was, is the age of our buses. And if you look in the letter or part of the report where it says they've already replaced all 5 engines and transmissions, there's a message here. That is in the old contract, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe I am. The major repairs were covered by the contractor, and it was part of the contract. And as those buses age, they deteriorate. And I have asked repeatedly about when are we going to start doing something about replacing those buses, and I've been told, well, we're waiting for this report or whatever. But yet I see we're going to replace a dump truck because it's needed. Well, the buses were needed a couple of years ago or a year ago. I got on the bus one day and ended up riding on the specialized transit because 3 of our buses were down with bad transmission problems because of their age. Our hills are the problem. And we can't get rid of the hills, much as we some days would like to. It would save us considerable money in a lot of areas. But the reality is, if you don't replace equipment when it's at its life point, it's going to end up costing you money. And this is the argument that we've had many times about replacing equipment in our operations, but not in our transit. And I think we should be looking at that. And when somebody wants a fast repair on a bus, that increases the repair cost because the mechanics have to work overtime, and as we're all aware, that can get very expensive. So it's, and we're also facing a fact that gas prices, for some unbelievable reason, even though oil prices seem to be not that high compared to what the gas prices are, have been high for a period of time. We don't know what they're going to do, but that is also part of the reason for our increases. So some of the things we're party to, and I feel that the bus system we have, considering the limitations we have of geography and a few other things, they're doing the best job they can, but they're working with out-of-date equipment. And most business people, faced with that, would be replacing the equipment. And the other thing it does tell us is that when we do get new buses or reconditioned buses, if we choose to go that route, which is one way of saving a lot of money, we want very, very heavy-duty transmissions and heavy-duty motors because they're needed. Thank you.
Councillor Bird.
Just very briefly, I think the motion is just an interim solution to a budgetary problem, but also, I think, a bigger kind of vision for the city and what we want to invest in, whether we're investing in alternatives to cars and traffic that are going to lower our carbon footprint in our city, or whether we're going to go the other way by diminishing public transit. And that's a big conversation, I think, that involves the whole community, and I expect that with the public meetings there will be some input along that way too. So I think it's important to pass this motion and then have that larger conversation.
Councillor Chamberlain.
Yes, and that's the way I looked at it too, is I did think we needed more fulsome discussion. I've been on 2 committees that have had very full discussions about housing, about buses coming out to where a lot of people who don't have cars use it, and that the bus doesn't come to, so that was around the routes. And the other one was the healthy communities, asking us to look at it through the lens of health. Through the poverty task force, there's a lot of people in this area are dependent on our buses. So I do think that all of that needed to come out in a little more fulsome way around our decisions. I didn't think we'd be having that discussion tonight, and so I just moved it. I'd like to go forward with what we're going to talk about in the next while.
Councillor Dare.
Thank you, Your Worship. As I said earlier, this buys us time. However, the system is not sustainable. If we do nothing, if we just let the system continue the way it is, at budget time in 2014, we start the year $400,000 trying to find to pay for this. We then add to that the cut in provincial funding that we know we're going to have. And we add to that wage increases that naturally happen. If we add to that inflation, et cetera, we're going to be looking at a 9% tax increase next year if we do nothing. This is not sustainable. What this motion does is buy us the time to have that fulsome discussion. And we do need to get the public involved, but not just the public who ride the buses, everybody. And we need to have that discussion, but it can't stay the same as it is now. That is not sustainable past 2013. Ends, full stop.
Further discussion? All those in favor? Those opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. We look forward to the report back. And I do hope that if there's any, when the public consultation is scheduled, that it is early in the spring and is not in the heat of the summer. I also would hope that the committee would be discussing a marketing budget to drive some interest into this, as well as there is some correspondence between myself and the acting dean of Georgian College. They're very interested in having an agreement that would provide up to 1,000 bus passes for full-time students registered at Georgian College, as well as a push on transit passes for students, as well as driving some life into the actual system itself, perhaps free wireless on all the buses and so on. So I think that if you're going to try and market a product, we're only going to, we hope, lose less money on this system. This, I think if anyone in the room thinks that a public transit system is going to make money, I think you are sadly mistaken. I think that you have to realize it's a service you've decided to provide, and we're committed to that service. But in order to get more people on using the service, you have to make it attractive. And I have very little use for the consultant's report that we commissioned recently. I think that fell short of expectations, but I do hope the committee can find something that they can pick off the bones of that to come up with some recommendations. So I wish the committee all the best, and I hope to see that back here to council in short order, really. I think that we need to get on with it and put together a system that people want to ride. So, thank you. It was a good discussion. We have a report from the purchasing agent with regards to one 2013 one-ton dump truck. What is council's direction on this? Councilor Berger.
Notice the line in there to reach the end of its life.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? That motion is carried. Thank you. Again, we have a report from our purchasing agent with regards to an engineering design services and contract administration, Harrison Park electrical upgrade and entrance switch upgrade. What is council's direction on this, please? Councilor Dare.
Move the recommendation, Your Worship.
Thank you. Discussion? Councilor Wright.
A question, please. This report, when I've read it, and where did I find it? The RFP was sent, the technical scores were scored by staff. May I please know what staff scored this report?
I'll refer, it looks like the Director of Community Services is ready to respond to that.
Thank you, Your Worship. 3 staff scored the RFPs that were submitted. They included staff, the manager of parks, the manager of engineering, as well as an engineering technologist working for the city.
When this went through operations, we used to have councillors read these reports as well. Do councillors read these anymore?
I have.
Through you, Your Worship, there were no councillors included in the scoring.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed? Councilor Wright, Councilor Chamberlain, and Councilor Lemon. That motion is carried. We have a report from the event facilitator and the engineering assistant with regards to the One World Festival. Council direction on this one? Councilor Mann.
Thank you, Worship. I'll move the recommendation and provide direction that all applicable fees will be applied. This event, for 2 years, we've waived the fees for certain things like picnic tables and garbage cans and building permits for the inspection of the tent, sorry. But as is noted in the report, we don't do that for any other events, and I think it's time that we tell this event, we've helped it for 2 years, but that can't continue, so I'll move that we receive the report, approve the festival, but all applicable fees would apply.
Okay, further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried, thank you. We have a report from the event facilitator with regard to the tall ships update. Update number 6, it's noted. What's council's direction on this? I understand the tickets are going well. Councilor Lemon.
I would move the recommendation, please.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That motion's carried. Thank you. We have a report from the Manager of Engineering Services with regards to Highway number 26, connecting link speed limit reduction. Councilor Blatty.
I'll move the recommendation. This is to adjust the speed limit on 16th Street with Heritage Grove Center opening. It's less rural, I suppose, and becoming more urban, more commercial, so reducing the speed limit makes sense along there, and I think we're probably required to do it, so I move that.
Comments? Mr. McRoberts.
Just wanted to let council know that certainly we do need council's resolution to basically support this initiative, but the final decision with respect to the reduction of speed is still remains to be decided by MTO, the Ministry of Transportation of Ontario, but they require us to basically acknowledge and support that reduction before they make a final decision.
Okay. Any questions, comments, discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. The item 12B10 has been deferred, so we'll move along to minutes of boards and committees for approval, and we have 6 here. What is council's direction on these ones? Councilor Lemon.
I move that we approve 12C 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6.
Discussion. Councilor Wright.
Thank you, Your Worship. I want to draw council's attention to the Financial Advisory Committee minutes. I can find them.
12C4.
And the report that we received at that meeting, there's a lot of information in there, and I did find it, and it's on page 2 of our minutes. And it talks about Owen Sound, and of course the report is very thick, but the pages that we pulled out, it's very, very interesting because it does talk about our slow growth, our demographic, the age of 65 is higher than average. We have a higher mix of commercial, multi-residential properties. The household incomes are lower than average. We have lower assessed property. We're geographically small and densely populated. But then when you take a look at it, we're doing well for the size and for what our income and our revenue and everything is. But it's a great report, and I'd maybe ask the Director of Finance where people can get a copy if they want to have a look at it.
Through you, Your Worship, we will be posting copies of the full BMA study. It's over 300 pages on our website, and it will be available to the public. This is the third time we've partaken in that, and I believe it gives council as well as the citizens of Owen Sound good, honest, independent information. So we will have that posted shortly on our website.
Thank you. Councillor Purdon.
Yes, I was just trying to find the operations minutes, but I can't find them, but I made a few notes. First of all, I was really pleased to see that in their annual wastewater treatment plant report that there was the lowest amount of effluent that has bypassed the system in a calendar year. That's really great news for Georgian Bay and great news for the city, and speaks to the efforts of council and operations in what was surely not a very great record we had with effluent. So that was really nice to see. And the other is, there was a report on leachate at the city dump, that's no longer the city dump, and some efforts there. And I just happened to be looking at the city of Kingston just won an award from FCM and through their Green Municipal Fund about planting hybrid poplars all around their dump site in order to deal with the leachate and to save energy costs for the pumps. It just seemed like such a great idea. I have no idea if it's of any relevance at all to our situation, but I just wanted to kind of, you know, how you cruise through this information. There's such great information on that website about green initiatives. Just to pass that along to the Operations Committee if they want to have a look.
Certainly proves the point that a poplar tree will grow anywhere.
Well, they're hybrid poplar trees.
Okay. Councillor Chamberlain.
Yes, I wonder if we could pull out from the Economic Development Report just the small part on preparing city-owned surplus properties, and just have that discussion around that, please.
So we'll remove that, that one item. Just for the clerk, could you direct them more specifically to where that is in the minutes?
It's under 12C3, and it's right near the end of the report under site, preliminary site plan preparation. You see that?
Is there any other comments or questions with regards to the balance of the minutes covered in the motion? Seeing none. Oh, Councillor Purdon.
Sorry, I had one more question just about.
Yes, sure.
We talked a little bit about it in transit, but in, again, operations, that there was a request to run the transit system down to the housing development, the not-for-profit housing on 6th Avenue East, and operations has decided that's not possible. I've heard many people who'd really like transit available there, but apparently the road's not big enough. Is that the end of that story from the operations, or is there going to be a revisiting of that at some point? Just would like to know.
Sure. Refer to the Director of Operations for response.
Thank you, Your Worship. Certainly, we have had several requests from various organizations with respect to extending transit service on 6th Avenue East beyond, I would say, basically into the north of 20th Street. Unfortunately, that section of the road is a dead-end piece of road. It doesn't provide a turnaround for a large bus. So we have looked at that. Certainly, we have brought it forward to the Operations Advisory Committee on several occasions. We are challenged by the configuration of the road. However, should at some point in time development occur further north on extending that road, or some type of activity cause us to be able to allow a turnaround or extend that road, then I believe we would look at extending that service through that route.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. And just further to that, the request has been sort of out there for quite some time, a bus shelter, and I'll look to the Director at the intersection of 6th and the bus goes, let's put it that way.
6th and 20th.
20th, thank you, Councillor Lemon. A bus shelter was put in, and the sidewalk was extended to that area as well. So those are two things, and realizing that's not perfect, but until the roadway situation changes someday in the future, that's probably the best we can do at this point.
Just a further comment, if I may, Your Worship, through that same point. There has been a request on the corner of 6th Avenue and 20th Street to have a bus shelter. That bus shelter request has been processed. We were challenged by the fact that the location of the shelter was located right on top of a very shallow water main. So last year, we had that water main relocated as part of our water main reinvestment structure. So that's been done. A concrete pad is in place, and the actual shelter itself is coming imminently within the next few weeks to be installed.
The revitalization of the entire transit system. A small part. Okay, so save and accept item 8C within the Economic Development and Tourism minutes with regards to identifying properties and preparing them for sale. Is there any other question or discussion around the balance of the minutes for approval? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. We'll now deal with item 8C out of Economic Development and Tourism, and I'll refer to Councillor Chamberlain.
Yes, it's just, I wondered if we could slow the process down a little bit so that we could have a little more time for a fulsome report about what the uses of these three properties could be for all of us. It's around the sale of the property being the, where am I going? I've gone in the wrong one here now, too. It's the CP rail, the CN station, and the courthouse. And I wonder if we could just have a report that might give us a bit more ideas of how these, what could be used, how they could be used.
Ms. Corsi.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. Through to Councillor Chamberlain, perhaps you could advise what you want done,
Yes.
because clearly, the CP rail station, for instance, there's been a fulsome report on that. There's been direction and actions taken by the museum board, who are directly involved in that one. On the CN station, we are putting significant funds into that building, and we're moving forward to try and find lessees for both of those buildings. And on the Grey County Courthouse and the jail, we don't own the jail yet, luckily. But short of asking staff to do some sort of significant analysis on potential uses, and I would probably ask that we find funds if we're going to do that, to have someone with that expertise give us options. I'm not quite sure what else staff can provide for you.
And you're correct. I was wanting to slow down the process in a way that there seems to be a lot of people with ideas for those properties and that to give to the city, and I just wondered if we shouldn't be able to accept some of those ideas to put into what we're planning to do with it.
I'm just going to try and help you out here a little bit in terms of...
Maybe only one property.
Are you thinking of requests for expressions of interest or proposals on, what a potential developer would see?
That would be one way, and that would be, you could help me out with that. Was that a way that we could do that? Will that cost us any money to do it that way?
Mr. Furness is itching to get in here.
Yes.
Oh, I see.
I think I'm going to carry this a little bit, if I could.
Absolutely.
We can absolutely, it is our intention, particularly with properties that we're looking for lessees, to do requests for proposals. But again, certainly if it is council's wish, I can simply ask our staff not to do anything for 6 months and see what comes out, but I'm not quite sure what you're going to do with that. We have no money to deal with those buildings. And they are costing us money every day we carry them.
Councillor Adair.
This council has been, for almost the entire time I've been here, fairly open to ideas. If somebody comes forward with an idea, and I would not be glib in saying some cash in hand for any of those buildings or any other property in the city. We would be open to that. By putting these out there, we're not putting up barriers to input. We're in fact opening it up for exactly that. I don't want to sit on any of these properties for a day longer than we have to. Please, if people have ideas that they're not forwarding directly to the city, please do that. You may be surprised.
Councilor McMahon?
Thank you, Your Worship. Certainly on the CP station, I think we've done everything we can there to try and develop that and get it on the market, so I support the committee recommendation on the CP station and moving forward. On the CN station, again, council's made the decision there to move forward there. I suppose, question to the city manager, that process, did you say would involve a request, expression of interest? Is that what you're envisioning, specific to the CN station, the marine rail?
We would do that for both of those buildings where there's a least circumstance. And I can tell you the CN station, we still have a significant amount of work to get done by the museum, because we're very carefully dealing with the artifacts in that museum. The museum board is dealing with that. They've had their visioning exercise. They've recently, I believe, either passed or considering passing further resolutions on that matter. So we can report back to this council on where they're at on that whole process.
Certainly on the CN station or the marine rail, there's a certain amount of sensitivity, but moving forward in the direction we have been, again, as Councillor Dare said, unless there's an alternative, if the Marine Rail Museum had been working, we wouldn't be at this point. So, you know, we're moving forward with that process. I'm comfortable with what you've just described. I guess the question, if until that time, is it envisioned that the visitor center would stay in that location until something, you know, if somebody obviously comes forward and says, I want to buy your building and put a restaurant, we'd probably move as fast as we could. But if that doesn't happen, what about the visitor center? What do you envision there?
It is not our intent to leave that building empty, and we would probably leave the visitor center there until we had an additional use, or at least at a minimum came back to this council with the options that they're faced. And I would like, I think there's a misconception out in the public. We are not losing our history regarding our rail and our waterfront. We are in fact adding to how we preserve, promote, and most importantly, get out in our community to tell them about our history and about what this city was about. And we're doing an amazing job on that now. We had very, very limited number of people that went through that building. We are doing a much better job, and I really commend both the museum board and Virginia Eichhorn, who is really getting out in the community and telling the community what has happening now and what our history is about, and promoting and encouraging people to understand that. So I just don't want anyone to think we're simply closing a door here and forgetting about something. We're not. We're building on what we have in this city, and we're promoting that, and we're just doing it in a more progressive, more mature way than we have in the past, where we simply open the door and hope people would come in.
I would echo those comments. I think they were excellent. The way it was working wasn't actually working, so a change needed to be made. So we've received some correspondence on that issue, but with respect, what was happening wasn't working. Articulated very well. Last question on the courthouse and the jail, the court building and the jail. I do have to agree, I had a certain amount of hesitation when I saw the minutes and they spoke to put it up for sale. And I wasn't quite sure what that meant or how that looked. So again, speaking that there is some sensitivity to this building in this area, the process you're seeing once the jail becomes ours, if the jail becomes ours, again, what would that process, a request for proposals again? Is that what you're looking at?
Anyone with cash, I think we should talk to. The courthouse is protected. It is a designated building. Obviously, it has to be done with sensitivity, but council, as landlords, we're not doing a particularly good job right now.
Just my last point on that one, well, on all of these, but certainly on the ones that have been discussed here, I think council is, has a certain amount of sensitivity to these, so I think we'd like to be kept as fully informed as possible as we move forward to ensure that council has a comfort level. But from what I've heard tonight and what I see, I'm comfortable with moving forward as it's stated.
Councillor Chamberlain?
Yes, and I'm very thankful for the conversation. I think it's a communication thing that we're trying to convey this information. I'm sorry, I was a little befuddled about it myself. So I guess what we need to do now is just put that back into that part and approve that, the part that's, or do I make a motion now to move this part of the report that we pulled out?
You can do whatever you like.
All right, well, I will do that. I'll put it back in the report.
So you're moving the recommendation?
Yes.
Councillor Purdon?
I just wanted to also add with the CN rail station, I think that there's a lot of feedback, at least coming my way, about the need to have some kind of connection for the public between the waterfront and the history of that area, and that building actually does represent that for many, many people in the community, whether it's a museum that doesn't work or whatever it is. It's a place in the community where people connect our marine history with that space. And I've heard quite a lot of comment coming that way about how important that is to the community. So I think as a council and as a city, we need to keep that in mind, and I'm sure it is being kept in mind, but I don't think that's been communicated or people understand that as fully, that we want to have that connection between our culture and history with the harbor. It is our building. Using it as a museum. So I think there's a bit of a gap there, so if we can find a way to close that gap or however that works, that would be helpful.
Ms. Corsi?
Thank you. I would encourage members of the public and all of us to review the report that Virginia Eichhorn did regarding this whole matter. I think she set it out well. I think the museum board at their visioning exercise made the comment that walls don't educate. It is telling the stories of the things that are contained within those walls. And I think as we move forward, we'll continue to do a good job on that. I think a much better job than we have in the past.
Councillor Body?
Just fill in one blank. One of the things that the museum board looked at is the fact that they're running two museums, one being the Billy Bishop home. We're coming up to 100th anniversary of Bishop's heyday in the First World War, and like the heyday of Tom Thompson and his years in Algonquin Park, Bishop is a very, very important piece of our history. There is not, I think if you went right across the country, you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone to give you the name of any other war hero in Canada other than Bishop. And part of the goal of the board is that they focus on Bishop at this time when it's so important to remind people and to really focus on the house and not be spread out too thin with not enough people coming through either door. So it isn't, I don't want it to be lost that there's a reason behind it, and it's to focus on something that's really strong and important to us. So we may be moving things around, but we're still focusing on a piece of our history that's important. Thanks.
Councillor Bear?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to echo what the city manager said, the report that Virginia Eichhorn did was quite exciting around the issue of interpreting the marine and rail stories on the waterfront. And I'm hoping that either through the museum board or through the art gallery or perhaps even through the city's cultural committee that we can begin work on how to tell that story. We have the Ancasters there. It's very, very poorly interpreted. Having a museum there or not is irrelevant to the interpretation of that artifact that's there. There's the caboose and the, I will toot my own horn very early on as a councillor when the railways were tearing up the lines. I worked very hard to make sure that there was a piece of track left in front of that building so that it didn't completely lose its context of what it was and what it was used for. There's the caboose. There are some other artifacts on the waterfront that need to be properly interpreted and have not been properly interpreted, and I think it's an exciting opportunity to do just that. And when people come down and say, oh, what's this tugboat here? Well, it was on the back of one of our bills, and it was built here, and all of those stories are there to be told, and there are unique and interesting ways to tell those stories.
Certainly, a number of birthday parties were held for lots of children in the caboose when it used to be at McDonald's. I've often thought that was maybe a little something that the city should have been advocating for, to have dinners and private functions in the caboose, but that's a whole other thing. So, needless to say, I hope that the outdoor free concerts will continue, and I hope that they do not continue beside an empty building. And that has been my overriding concern in this. I think the building functions really well as a visitor spot, and I think that there's still some life to part of that building, and there's some opportunities perhaps for private sector as well. But it is a meeting place. It is a place where people in the community like to meet. And I think this discussion's been really helpful to get the message out that that the board of directors of the museum, in fact, supports the relocation of the artifacts. And that is something that, they came to grips with themselves. That is something that has been driven by them, and the city is working with them and responding to take good care of those artifacts. So we'll see how this goes. Any further discussion? To the motion. Moved by Councillor Chamberlain. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. We have minutes of the in-camera meetings of February 11th Council and January 18th Municipal Nonprofit Housing. It's Council's direction on those. Councillor Lemon.
Motion to approve.
Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion's carried. Other business, Councillor Adair.
Thank you, Your Worship. Not to belabor the point about buses, but every year the Operations Committee does a tour around the city. The whole committee gets together and they look at the infrastructure needs and, this road needs to be fixed, et cetera. And not to put anyone in particular on the spot, but outside of myself and Councillor Lemon, I'm not sure there's a lot of ridership of the buses by members of council or members of the Operations Committee, and I would propose that for a month that all of council and all of the members of the Operations Committee be given a bus pass and be absolutely encouraged to ride the buses, meet the people who are on the buses, see what the routes that we presently have actually look like. I must say I don't ride the bus as much as I did when I lived out Brook, where I was a fairly regular bus user, but I do still ride it from time to time, but I think it would be important because it is a fairly big decision that we are going to be facing as we move forward, that we do a familiarization tour. Much, as I said, as the Operations Committee does, it's one thing to say, oh, well, this street needs to be fixed. It's another thing to be actually taken out to that street and shown where the potholes are and where the concrete is disintegrating. And so I would move that council and the Operations Committee be provided with 1 month worth of bus pass, and that we ride the buses.
We have a motion. Councillor Lemon.
Speaking in strong support of that motion, I think that a lot of councillors will get a real education. I remember being told at one point we should look for smaller buses. And about a week later, I was on the bus, I had to stand for the whole trip because the bus was filled with people. That was about 11 in the morning, I think. And then a few weeks after that, I ran into the same thing. I feel that, like, we all are involved with the Bay Shore. We go to hockey games and other events. We go to Harrison Park. But I think also, when you include that, it might be good for our senior staff as well to ride the buses around the city and realize just how important it is to people in our community. Thank you.
Councilor Heinbecker.
Thank you, Worship. I certainly look forward to voting in favor of this motion. I wouldn't want to leave the impression from the last speaker that council and senior staff don't realize how important busing is to people in the city. I certainly think council and staff fully understand that, but look forward to voting in favor of the motion.
Councillor Adair.
Just to be clear, I didn't say that. We have two at the water treatment plant, and I would be hard-pressed to think that there was anyone on council that thought that the water treatment plant wasn't important, but we do have tours of that. In fact, we even tour some of our major factories and other employers, and I think as a familiarization exercise, it would be well worth doing.
Is there any further discussion on this? If I may just add, I would like to not receive the monthly pass. I'll just pay my bus thing and I'll go when I can. I don't want the monthly pass. Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. We'll see you on the buses. Anything else, Councillor Adair? That was the one item. Could I have a motion that the committee rise, please?
Move the committee rise.
All those in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. We require a resolution adopting proceedings in committee of the whole, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Lemon, that the action taken in committee of the whole in considering public meetings, deputations, public question period, matters arising from correspondence, reports, matters tabled, motions for which notice was previously given, and other business be hereby confirmed by this council.
All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Any notices of motion? New business by resolution, bylaws, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Wright, that bylaws numbers 2013-38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, and 2013-46 be hereby passed and enacted.
All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. And we're adjourned. Thank you.
You misinterpreted what I was saying.